Okay, so the first step in building the casting platform, you have to remove the seat out of the Scott Canoe. And it's held with just 4 screws and these little mounting brackets over here. So I'm actually replacing an older deck that I had on for about 10 years. So I've just put the seat in here just for reference, but you just want to pop out those 4 screws that are in the ends of these wooden brackets and just pop your seat right out and take that right out of there. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is you need to measure across the bow from mounting bracket to mounting bracket, because the casting deck is actually going to use 3 points of contact. The mounting bracket on either side, and then up here on this little step is where the platform is going to rest. So it's a little bit difficult to measure on a canoe because it's a little tight. So you want to just measure this one right off the bat. And you want to be right at the edge, and I got 44 3/4 across there. Okay, so the beginning of the deck will be 44 3/4 across, and then at the apex up here, you can just pick any spot that you want, but you just need to get a measurement. And up here, I'm going to go with about 8 inches. Doesn't have to be exact because it'll just fit wherever it goes. So I'm going to go into the garage and take some scrap wood and cut a length that's 44 3/4 here, and then I'm going to cut one for 8 inches up there, and then we're going to come back and lay them in there and take some measurements. Okay, so I've cut a board that's 44 3/4, just this little piece of scrap 2x that I had. I'm going to put that right into place. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but I've actually marked the center line, which is 22 3/8 on this board. Put it in place right at the end of those mounting brackets. And this is my 8-inch piece, and you can see I've put a center line here at 4 inches. And I'm going to slide that up in so it's nice and straight. It's right up in there. Now, one of the things we have to do is we have to determine the shape of the bow, and you can see it tapers down not only towards the bow, but it also tapers this way, which is a little bit of a challenge. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to take some measurements at different stations, different points along this distance from this board up to that board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure here from the top of that board back to this one, which is about 68 inches. And now I'm going to go cut another piece of scrap wood that I'm going to lay right in here that'll allow me to take some more accurate measurements.
There you go.
Okay, so I've cut this piece of scrap wood. Again, it's just simple 1x stuff I had laying around. And what I did was, this is 68 inches, so it'll reach from the bow of the boat back to our board back here. And what I did was I marked off from the base 1 foot increments, 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, and 5 foot. That'll give us basically station marks so that we can take some measurements across the width of the bow and transfer that to our sheet of plywood that we're going to use for our deck. So I'm going to secure this, and what I'm going to do is secure the edge, this edge right here, to the center line. I'm not going to line up the center of this board in the center line. I'm going to use the edge, which will give us a better reference for when we measure it. So I'm going to go ahead and tack this in place. Okay, so my board is in place. I've got my station marks, 1 through 5 feet. And as I said, it's lined up so that this edge of the board is actually the center line. And I did that because it's kind of difficult to try to measure across the width of the canoe here where it tapers down, and to try to keep your tape measure straight. So what we're going to do is we're going to take just a simple straight edge here. My triangle, and I'm going to line the edge of the tape up with the station marker. So in this case it's 1 foot, and I'm going to run it over there, and I'm going to make sure that it's as square as I can. So I'm going to bump it up against that, and then I'm going to take the measurement right along this edge. So in this case I've got 20 1/4 inches to the side. So I'm just going to write that down right here, on my station mark. And then I'm going to move up to the second station at 2 feet. I'm going to put my tape measure right across the 2 foot mark. I'm going to square it up with my triangle. And I've got 17 7/8. So I'm just going to jot that down. Move up to my 3 foot. Same thing, level it up with a square. Here I've got 14 3/4. 4 feet, 10 7/8. And then the last one at 5 feet, 6 3/4. Okay, so now I've got my marks all the way up at each station mark, plus I also have the 0 station, which is this board, which is at 44 3/4, and the top, which is at 8. So now I'm going to be able to take these measurements and basically multiply them by 2 when I transcribe them onto my sheet of plywood. We'll go try that in the garage. Okay, so we've got our measurements that we took off the boat. They're all on our little guide here. And what I've got here is just your standard sheet of 4x8 exterior grade plywood. And we're going to transcribe those measurements we took from the boat onto the plywood so that we can cut out our deck. So the first measurement we took, you'll remember, across the braces was 44 3/4 inches. So we actually want to cut that down in half so that we can measure across the center line here. So that first measurement is actually going to be 22 3/8. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my T-square and I'm going to mark the center line and mark the station guides, and we're going to transcribe those points. A couple of different places. Right up the center line. Okay, so that's my center line. Now I'm going to mark off my stations just like I had on the board at 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, there's 4 foot, there's 5, and then I'm going to go 8 inches from there, which will be the top. Now I've got my station marks, and I'm just going to run a line right through them from side to side so I have a reference. Okay, so I've got my ruler here, my 36-inch ruler, and what I'm going to do now is take those marks that measurements that we made that I've recorded here on this sheet of plywood for each station, and I'm just going to make a mark on each side of the center line. So the first mark, 22 3/8. I'm going to do that on either side of the center line. Now I'm going to bump up to station 1, 20 1/4 inches. Mark that on either side of the center line, right on our nice square reference line. And I'm going to do that all the way up for each station. So you can see these marks on the plywood. They're basically half the distance, and they're marked from the center line. And so I've got a mark here, I've got a mark up here at the 1 foot station, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot, and then 5 foot 8 inches, which is the end of our deck. So now, if you were an artist, you could probably make a nice straight line that connects all those dots. That will be the outside edge of your deck, but I am not an artist. So I need to have a little bit of tool usage to help me draw that line. So I've got these little finish nails, and I'm going to pound one in at each one of those marks. Okay, so now I've got this piece of 1x. It's a long piece of 1x. It's much longer than our board. And what I'm going to do is bend this around these nails so that it makes a nice, smooth curve. And I'm going to make sure my ends extend beyond the nails so I don't try not to get any flat spots, which I would if the board was too short. So I'm going to take another nail. I'm going to snug that right up against my upper nail on the 5 foot 8 inch station mark. I'm going to pound that in right there. I'm going to take another nail, and I'm going to bend this right along my nails, and then I'm just going to put another one down here just to hold it in place while I draw the line. Just like that. And I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to make a nice smooth line from nail to nail. Pull that out. And that is going to be the outside edge of my deck. And then I'm going to repeat it on the other side. Okay, so I've got my marks all connected here on each side that represent the sides of the deck. So you can start to see it take shape here. Now you remember when we were in the boat, I showed you not only does the bow taper towards the front, well, the deck doesn't just taper towards the front of the bow, but it also changes angle down along the sides. So if you just cut on this line right here, it's probably going to be very tight on the bottom because the bottom is actually slightly narrower than the top. So what I'm going to do is just cheat a little bit and just cut on the very inside of our lines. So there may be a little bit of a gap between the deck and the side of the boat, but that's not going to matter any because we're going to put a covering over this. We're going to put some rubber mats or some carpet over it that will extend a little bit beyond there. So it won't be an issue with stuff dropping down. But the problem is if it gets too tight, you'll have to come back to the garage and trim it up a little bit, which we may have to do anyway. But we're going to give it a shot. Before we get started, one thing you want to do is check underneath your plywood and make sure you don't cut your sawhorses. Okay, so I finished up the cut last night. Just a couple of things I wanted to show you before we move it out to the boat. First, you have to do a little back cut when you come across the point of the bow right there. You can see I had to sort of flare the cut out so I can get my blade to make that 90-degree angle and cut straight across. The other thing I wanted to show you, remember I told you that you want to cut on the inside of the line so that it will fit. That's something that I learned with the first deck that I put in, that if you follow the line too tight, it'll just be too wide and you'll have to fix it. So you can see here, if you follow that cut down, you can see how I'm on the inside of that line all the way down. That's how I made my cut. So I'm going to take this outside and we're going to stick it on the boat and see how it works. Alright, I'm going to try to slide it up in there, see what we got for a fit. Alright, that's pretty good. You can see the gaps. There's going to be some gaps on the side there, but that's alright because that's going to be covered up when we put our carpet or whatever you want to put on it. And I'm going to put some padding on it this time, but it's okay to have that little gap up there so it will fit on the bottom. So I'm going to take this out now and I'm going to paint it up with some exterior paint so it'll last a little bit longer, and then I'm going to put some padding on it and we'll see how that looks. Okay, so I've got one coat of paint on. One thing I forgot to do before I started painting, I've got my gas line that runs up from underneath the deck. So I'm going to just cut a hole on the side of my deck right here to allow that line to pass through. And the other thing I'm going to do when I cut it is I'm going to cut it so that there's an opening on the edge so I don't have to feed it in and out of the hole every time I want to take my line out. It'll just pop out to the side. So I'm going to do that next, and then I'm going to finish up a couple of coats of paint. Okay, so I've got the painting all done, And now just a couple of things left to do. One thing I did, just to stiffen this up a little bit. This is a fairly long space across the boat, and it's 3/4 inch plywood, so it's pretty rugged. But I added a piece of hardwood right here. This is an ash board that I had. You probably don't want to use softwood. That's probably not going to help you out too much. So that's just a piece of rough cut ash that I had left over. And I took a measurement in between the braces, centered this. So the braces on the side of the boat are going to fit right in here. And this is going to stiffen it up in case you get a big fella that steps on your deck at that end of it down there. It won't bow too much. It's pretty rugged with 3/4, but that's just to give you a little more support. Then you can decide if you want to just leave it like that. That's fine. With my first deck, I used some of this carpet that I got at Home Depot, and I just put a strip basically right down the center of it, just make it easier on the feet. I think this time I'm going to try some rubber pads that I bought. You can get these interlocking pads at Home Depot or Lowe's, and so I'm going to put them all together like this, and then I'm going to use some liquid nails, and I'm going to glue it to the surface, so it'll be a little bit easier on the feet if you're standing there barefoot especially. So that's my next step, and we'll see how that works out. Okay, here are my rubber pads that I bought at Lowe's actually, and they're about 20 bucks for a pack of 4. And you can see here I've got 6 of them all connected, and I've spread them out. I put a piece of plywood on the floor underneath them just to try to keep them a little bit clean. And what I'm going to do is just lay that, I'm going to lay my deck on it to see if that's going to fit properly. That looks pretty good. I've got a gap here between the little edge pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this back over. I'm going to put some liquid nails all along the edges and in the center of it. I'm going to lay that back down. I'm going to put some weight on it and see how that works. I'll let it dry overnight. Well, there's a good use for some of my old trolling motor batteries. Put some weight on it. Oops, put some weight on it. And wait till tonight. Wait till tomorrow morning rather. And while that's doing that, I'm going to put some epoxy on my next anchor mounts. Okay, I'm getting ready to pop the deck back in. Now the deck is pretty heavy, it's 3/4 inch plywood, and so when you're motoring up and down the lake or down the river, it's not really going to bounce around too much, or if you're standing on it, it's not really an issue. But if you're trailering your boat over dirt roads, it could chatter a little bit. So I'm looking for a way to keep it tied down a little bit. We could bolt it back through these original holes that the seat was in, but what I found with my last one is if I just take some of this industrial strength Velcro and lay it here on the mounts for the seat, and then again up underneath here, and then just stick the deck on it and let it set for a few days so that tape sets in, it's perfect, and you don't have to worry about it. And that way, if you need to do some repairs, or if you want to reclaim this space without the deck, you can just pop it in and pop it out without any issue at all. Okay, so here's the deck installed with a rubber mat. Now, when I put the rubber mat on, when I tacked it on to the plywood, I used liquid nails. And if you read the instructions on liquid nails, like I didn't, it'll tell you not for vinyl or plastic. Interesting, which led to this. So I had to scrape it all off. I wanted something that would hold it, but I didn't want it on there permanent because I didn't know how long it was going to hold up. I want to be able to replace it without replacing the entire wooden deck. So I just put some of this latex silicone caulking on there, which is, it's still not really on there tight, but you could pull it off if you want, but it's tight enough to hold it down. And then I added some of these panhead screws with washers on the side just to keep it in place. So that's pretty good. Still removable. If something goes wrong, if it gets worn, you get a hole in it, doesn't hold up in the weather, you can pull it off. And like I said before, I used carpet on my last one, which worked fine. I just put that on with some regular sheetrock screws and probably got 3 or 4 years out of a piece of carpet before it started to grow things, and I wanted to replace it.